to clap. All right. Great to have you here, Julia Butterfly Hill. Uh, Folks have been asking about Luna, but also about you and how you're doing. It's been, what was the anniversary? I think a year or two ago. Was it the 20th anniversary?
20th anniversary. Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing how much time has flown by. It's like I recently have had to sort through some old files and photos and things, and seeing myself up in Luna, I look like such a baby. And now I have like all gray hair.
Well, it was certainly a very inspirational event, and Luna continues to be protected and safe. And so we have a whole update from Stuart on Luna. And so we're interested in hearing how you've been doing and just how your work has carried on, and if you're still working with the Circle of Life.
Okay. Well, for the first 7 years after I came down from Luna, I averaged 250 events a year. So I pretty much hit the ground running because people are always shocked that I'm an introvert, but I'm an extreme introvert. But I remind people, like, how long do you think an extrovert would have lasted by themselves in a tree in the middle of nowhere? You know, it's only an extreme introvert who could do what I did. But then the trees, told me, when I was up there, they said, Julia, just like when you go to a new country, you need a translator. Nature needs translators because we've been communicating since the beginning of time and people have forgotten how to listen, and they're going to listen to you. So we need you to do this. And honestly, in many ways, becoming a public person was much, much, much harder than all the other stuff I went through in the tree, from them trying to kill me to nature almost killing me and everything else. It was becoming public and learning how to communicate, because I never even used to talk for years. I could go for hours and hours and hours without saying one word. So, but because all that attention and energy came at me, I felt responsible to do something with it. And that's actually why I started Circle of Life, and part of why I'm so grateful for Trees Foundation, because I had a few different opportunities that were going to bring in money. And finally, I had a way to try and build a team to help take the energy that was coming at me and project it back out into the world. Because if it just stayed on me, it's the Julia Butterfly Show, and I was never interested in that. That's not why I went through what I went through. I would have come down at like day 100 or something. So I wanted to take that spotlight and all the energy and power, perceived and otherwise, that came with it, and use it to make a difference in the world. And so Trees Foundation was actually our first incubator to help us build and grow. I came from business world. I had never done nonprofit anything. So it was a really big learning curve for me. Some of it overlapped, but some of it was very different. So I was very grateful for Trees for being that intermediary bridge, because without Trees, I wouldn't have had that capacity to start building upon and leveraging all that stuff that was coming at me. And then for the next 7 years, I did the same thing on the ground. I thought it was gonna be like a year or two. It turned into 7 years. And I've been able to help raise millions of dollars for causes all over the world. I've been able to help save multiple forests, multiple community gardens. I've helped raise tons of money for after-school arts program for underserved youth. I've helped raise a lot of money and attention and awareness for homeless youth and youth in the foster system, like literally across the board, because while I was in Luna, I learned that every issue we're facing is the symptom. And the disease is the disease of disconnect. When we're disconnected from the earth, when we're disconnected from each other, we make choices and don't realize how it's truly impacting all of us. And that meaning all the beings, everything, and the future generations. And so when I came down, actually even before I came down, and I wanted to try and help weave that together for people, that if we don't, at the same time we're working on the symptoms, if we don't work also at the disease, we're never going to be able to get to the healing that our world and our planet needs.
Hmm. Yeah. Um, so looking back in 2021, we have such challenges still, and the climate crisis. And so, what are your thoughts in terms of what would you say to an activist that is sort of learning even about you, because they're just coming into this, and um, they also want to make a difference and change the outcomes and the trajectory we seem to be on. So what would your advice be to someone today that is wanting to protect what we have and restore the ecosystems that are falling apart?
Well, I would say probably the same thing I've been saying for years, which is number one, thank you. Because I tell people, if you get up in the world and wake up in the world today for the last many years, and you ask yourself, what can I do today to make the world a better place? And you care about the world, that's an act of courage right there. I mean, that is the salmon swimming upstream right there, you know? And I loved it. I've always talked about how the word courage, the root word for courage is coeur, from the French, which means heart. So anytime we are willing to wake up in the midst of all these challenges we are facing and ask ourselves, what would my heart guide me to say, think, and do today about whatever it is, whether it's the global climate instability, to how we've become so disconnected as a human family, where we're all picking sides and setting up camps and tents and, choosing who's right and who's wrong, whatever it may be, that if we wake up and ask ourselves that, we will find a way to sustain it, versus if we're just like, I'm mad at the corporations or I'm mad at the government. Because that's how I started in Luna. When I got to the top of Luna for the first time and I looked and I saw the Maxam owned Pacific Lumber Company, no joke, the first words out of my mouth was, wow, what I could do with a good rocket launcher from here. And people are always like, oh, Julia. And it was like, but that's, that was my thought. Like, if we could just take that out, the scenery would completely change. And of course, that's not true, but that was my first reaction. And over time, that anger was eating me away. And I also saw it eating away a lot of other activists. That kind of anger is a candle burning at both ends, and it consumes us and really doesn't affect or change anything or anyone else but ourselves. And so I started telling people, and it's still true for me today, like, if you're not angry at the world, you're not awake. But do we choose to do what we do out of our anger, or do we choose to do what we do out of our love? And anger is actually the defense mechanism for us feeling pain about something, someone, or somewhere that we care about that is being hurt, violated, destroyed, or threatened. So when we feel that anger, if we can go beneath it to our heart and put our heart, our love into action, then no matter what the outcome, we will be able to sustain, because we don't really know the outcomes. It's like we protected Luna and the grove around it, and then some angry people, because Luna was a symbol, went and attacked Luna.
Mhm.
And even after I came down, I had to have a lot of security for a long time because of how many threats of attacks and attempted attacks there were on me. And so ever since I've come down, I've been able to be a part of a lot of wins, but I've also given a whole lot to some things that we've lost. And if it wasn't my heart generating my actions unattached to outcome, I would be depleted and exhausted and not willing to participate anymore.
Right. Well, it's good to hear from Stuart Moskowitz, who continues to caretake Luna and the conservation easement there, that Luna continues to heal from that attack. And we're we're wanting to know how Julia's doing. And, we know that you went through a lot of trauma in Luna at the time, and that you've also had some real challenges in the last few years. So can you talk about how you're doing, some of the challenges you're facing, and maybe some of the projects that you are interested in or are working on?
Well, unfortunately, I've not been able to do as much as I would like, because ever since 2014, I've basically gotten clobbered by one thing after another after another. And my way of dealing with difficulties is humor, and oftentimes twisted. And so I tell people that, like, not only does the universe keep ripping the rug out from underneath me, but then it rolls it up and beats the crap out of me with it. So I was living in the tropics, based in the tropics, which I loved. I have so many injuries from before Luna, let alone after, that being in the warmth next to the sea is one of the few places where my body doesn't hurt and where I can get exercise in a way that doesn't cause pain. And I have severe asthma that got worse after all that inhaling of all that smoke up in Luna from the clear cut burning. And so my physical well-being is the best in the tropics, but I was getting more and more sick and couldn't figure out why, and came to the United States, back to the United States in 2014, and ended up getting rear-ended twice in 2 weeks at the end of 2014. I had been hit by a drunk driver, and it totaled my body in 1996, which was part of the path that led me to Luna. So the next two kind of, I had spent all these years building support systems around all that injuries. And so the first hit kind of took the support systems down. So the second hit totaled me. And it did no damage to the car. So no lawyer would take my case. And so the insurance of the woman who hit me paid for the ER visit, and that was it. And it took 4.5 years and 2 hip replacements to be able to move free of pain again. And so, insurance covers the doctor's visits or physical therapy or prescription medication, but it doesn't cover chiropractic, it doesn't cover sports medicine massage, it doesn't cover all those things that I had to do to be able to function again. And then at the same time, my sickness went through the roof, and I figured out, because I'd been misdiagnosed like 10 years earlier, that the illness I had was late stage Lyme disease. And it severely damaged me, gave me a heart attack. I made my brain really foggy and messed up for quite some time. There were days where I couldn't even, lift this glass of water. Like I couldn't trust that I'd be able to even lift it and not drop it. It was really, really severe. And then finally I was starting to get better. And I was doing a few projects. I helped with a really cool project in Alabama with a nonprofit that's rebuilding the downtown area in Greensboro, Alabama, but it's building it through community ownership so that it can't get gentrified and bought out. And they're taking buildings that are literally falling apart and using almost all reclaimed and reused and repurposed materials, and winning awards and building houses for people who don't have them. Incredible work. So I've done a few things there. I've just done little bits more from behind the scenes because of all my injuries and illness. And I finally started feeling better. And then I inadvertently, without ever meaning to or wanting to or expecting to, met my soulmate. And it blew my heart wide open in a way that's only comparable to Luna. And 6 months later, they were dead from cancer. And then I finally, I just was stuck for a long time. I just was lost. I could barely get out of bed. So then I started doing some odd jobs. I'm very good as a plant-based chef, and I'm good at gardening and designing and things like that. So I started doing just random jobs. And then COVID hit. And so then I had to kind of lay low, because with Lyme disease and asthma, I'm a big target for COVID. So I laid low for a long time. And then I came back to the Bay Area where the woman I call my sister lives, and I bought a van because I was going to convert it as kind of my new living space. But the person I bought it from promised to put in a backup camera, never did. So I was driving my old little car, and I was at a stoplight and I got rear-ended for the fourth time, this time in a hit and run. It will be a year ago, July 15th, and I still can't walk longer than 10 minutes without being in pain, and I cannot drive longer than 45 minutes without being in pain. And the doctors have said, we've done everything we can. It's just going to take years of physical therapy and, all those things that I've been doing for years to get to some point where I won't hurt as bad. So unfortunately, the news since 2014 has been freaking brutal, but I've still been able to help projects that I care about. There's a really amazing art museum in Baltimore, Maryland, called the American Visionary Art Museum. And I've donated artwork that I did up in Luna to the museum, and I've helped them raise money. I've done events for youth in Mexico, because the one good thing about COVID is it got everybody using the Zoom stuff. So instead of me having to move my body everywhere, I could still be all over the world and not have to move my body, which was helpful because my body doesn't want to move. So I've still done some projects, but I've made it very difficult for people to get a hold of me, because what happened is I became famous for being an activist, which means everybody wanted and needed something and no one thought about contributing in exchange. So even all the wonderful teachers and parents who are like, my kid or my classes are writing a report on you, and we just love if you'd answer 3 questions. Like, for the longest time, I did all of that, but it was thousands and thousands and thousands of hours that I gave for free. And on top of everything else, I literally didn't even have enough for myself, let alone enough for anybody else. So I mostly just do things now based on some kind of a personal relationship that I've already had, in order to keep the world at bay and say, I love you, but you have to find your own inner hero and shiro. You have to find your own inner voice. You need to do what I had to do, So that's where I'm at now.
Is there a fund that people who would like to contribute to your medical expenses could, it sounds like you would rather not give out contact information specifically, but if there was a way for people to support your, your challenges right now with mobility and recovery from this latest accident and the previous accidents, is there some fund set up so that people can do that yet?
There isn't a fund. Thank you so much for asking. That's really generous. I mean, I guess you could post if you want to, but you don't have to, the email that I gave you for this, and say, this is only for supporting Julia, but don't feel like you have to, because that puts you kind of in a position of saying, this is how you can support her, but don't contact her for anything else because she's not going to reply. So it's up to you. Either way is fine, but thank you for being so thoughtful.
I won't give out your email unless you want me to. But maybe there's some other way we can keep in touch with you and help you. Yeah, is there a website or anything like that that people can connect with you through?
Well, my personal website is Julia Butterfly. I don't even know what the heck my own email website is. I think there's like juliabutterflyhill.com. It's like there's like 3 different websites 3 different links that send you to the same place, but I believe it's juliabutterflyhill.com. And on there is a blog. A really wonderful man named Perry kept asking me, I really want to do something to support you, Julia. I really want to do something to support you. And I said, well, out there in the internet universe is a world of all this content I've already created. And I would love for it to come back so that I can share it through my portal as well, and kind of have it all in place. So he's been extraordinary and has been watching every video he can find, reading every article he can find, and taking the things he thinks stand out the most and transcribing it. I don't know how many hours this man has spent now, hundreds. So the blog is just kind of an updating feed of all the kind of things that I've worked on and said in the past. So if folks want to see kind of the trajectory I've been on since Luna, that's a way that they can do it. And there is a support button on that website to support my work. But if they need like a tax write-off, it would need to go through Circle of Life. And there's not an email or anything on that website because that's what I had to do.
Yeah, but there's still a Circle of Life. It's still fiscally sponsored. Okay, cool.
Yeah, so we closed the public face of it years ago because basically it had become like the Julia Butterfly Hill fan club. And again, it was everybody wanting and needing me and nothing coming in. And I was working my butt off to generate the income as well as be everything to everybody. And finally I was like, why am I doing this? I think it's my heart longing to serve, but the rest of me was like, girl, you have got to stop. So we closed the public face and then we did a lot of thought and research and we decided to keep the status, and it's been great because we've been able to help launch many different projects. And now we're also fiscally sponsoring just a couple of ones that are personal relationship ones that have to do with regenerative farming with Indigenous people and people of color. So one of the things I've been passionate about, obviously, besides forests and oceans with the climate, is regenerative farming, where we're actually farming to put carbon back into the soil and create healthy food for communities in need. So we've been able to do some really cool things behind the scenes, and that's why we kept it. And it's actually been so great because how we've been able to incubate and help really cool projects that we wouldn't have been able to do if we hadn't have kept it. So that feels really good for me. It's like the next stage of the life of Circle of Life.
Fantastic. That's really really important work. So just, are there any last thoughts you have when you look back on your time in Luna, just things that you are grateful for that time? I know it was hard to come down and suddenly be a famous person because you were so eloquent and courageous. And yet, are there times that you just are grateful and want to express what that time meant for you?
Well, the one thing I'd want to make sure and say right now is how grateful I am to the various ground support team, especially like the last 9 months, we had a really solid team. And the folks who were working in the office, and in all of my talks, I've always told people that I might be famous for what I did, but all that means is more people are up in my business. But the truth is, without my ground support risking the rest to bring up food and supplies and pack out waste, and without the people answering the emails and the phone, like now we have phones, I could have answered the emails from the tree, but back then, no. Without each person in the group, we wouldn't have had the success we had. And I also use that as an example whenever I've done talks, workshops, interviews, anything, that people will sometimes look at what I did and say, well, I could never do that. And I always tell people, well, number one, neither could have I. Like if you had asked me at the day that I was standing at the base of the tree, are you going to go spend the next 2 years and go through all this stuff? I would have laughed, I would have screamed, and I would have run back down the mountain, So the first thing I tell people is our mind is the biggest obstacle. But secondly, support team is crucial. So if you're not the person meant to be me in the tree, you are someone who's meant to support some kind of energy, whatever that may be, for the animals, around nuclear, around climate change, around our children, our elders, whatever it is. Every position on the team is vital, because without it, you don't have the same strength. Mm-hmm. So that's what I want to make sure and say thank you to, just like thank you to trees, because without trees being that bridge for me, all that attention and energy was coming at me, and we would not have been able to do the same kind of work we were able to do with the help of trees. So every single person was vital to the success and continues to be. Stewart is the ongoing angel of Luna, Sanctuary Forest holding the covenant agreement. Like the team continues. And who knows what that team will be like in 100 years. But I think there's a million things I could be grateful for. But I think the thing that's most important for me to say thank you to is team, and how important team is, and how there is a role on every team for everyone.
Yeah, it seems like it's hard for people today to understand even just how diverse that network of groups were that were working. There were different, there was Trees Foundation, there was Earth First, there were all these elements at play, Epic, working all together.
Exactly. Yeah.
It couldn't have been easy.
Yeah, well, it's interesting too, because the diversity of people involved also created some real challenges. And but it was also one of my greatest teachers. It's like, well, if nature needs diversity in order to be beautiful and healthy and strong, then we need the same thing for our movements. And even if we don't all agree, we have to find a way to be different and still be okay with that, and find ways to support one another in our growth, in our beauty, in our health for our communities. And it was a really special time. I mean, clearly, the universe, Luna, called me at just the right time. If there hadn't been all that work done up to the point where I came along, who's to say what would have happened? And if there hadn't been all the work done by all the different groups while I was in the tree, who's to say what would happen? In the same sense. So we don't even have a way of calculating, being like, oh, well, this line goes to that line, goes to that line. It's a ripple that spread around the world and continues to. I mean, I just did a Zoom meeting with, oh God, I just went to say the name and I forgot it. It was like Poland, I think, or something like that. And so the story continues. It's taught in classrooms. It just has a life that is so much bigger than me. And in part, it's because of the we. And we, all of us, myself included, don't really know. We can't put in a chart or a graph how important our role was and is, but it is clear that it was all important. It was all I talk about it like soil. When you have really healthy soil, everything that grows out of it's going to be healthy. And a bird can fly by and drop a seed and it's going to grow. And it was like all of us together built this soil that all this stuff continues to grow from. And even after Luna got cut, incredibly diverse people from all walks of life came together to save Luna, because Luna had become this symbol of what it means to be connected to one another, even when it's challenging. And so to me, that's a beautiful legacy of Luna, that if the disease is the disease of disconnect, then the healing is all the ways that we can and do connect.